After years of service, I was finally coming home for Christmas. But then my dad sent me a message. "Christmas is better without you. Don't come." I just replied, "Understood." 5 days later, I had 10 missed calls from my family, including one from their lawyer. My name is Pablo. I'm 32 years old, and I spent the last 10 years in the Army. It's not an easy life, but I always believed it was worth it. Every mission, every sleepless night in some remote part of the world, I did it for something bigger. And honestly, I did it for my family. My parents, my younger sister, Valeria, my older brother, Axel. I believed my sacrifices were making their lives better. But everything changed with one message. Just 5 days before Christmas, for the first time in years, I had time off to come home to Colorado Springs. I'd been stationed overseas for 18 months, and thinking about Christmas with my family was what kept me going. I pictured the house covered in lights, the smell of turkey, the sound of laughter. My mom always made this amazing pumpkin pie, and my dad, who was usually pretty strict, would soften up a bit during the holidays, or at least that's how I remembered it. The flight home was brutal. Layovers in Frankfurt and Chicago, before finally landing in Denver. While I waited for my luggage, I checked my phone. That's when I saw the message from my dad. He usually kept his texts short, stuff like "call when you land" or "bring beer." But not this time. This time it said, "Christmas is better without you. Better not come." I read it over and over because I couldn't believe it. It felt like a gut punch. I just stood there in the airport as people rushed past, but everything around me went blurry. My hands were shaking when I typed my response. I didn't want to sound hurt, even though I just wrote, "Understood." Then I turned off my phone and booked a hotel near the airport. I was supposed to stay there one night before taking a bus to Colorado Springs. But now, I had no idea what to do. I wanted to call him, demand an explanation. But I didn't. If he didn't want me there, I wasn't going to beg. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the bed, going over every conversation I'd had with my family. Nothing had seemed off. My mom always told me she was proud. Valeria sent me memes and asked for advice. Axel was a little distant, but I never thought it was personal. And my dad, yeah, he was tough, but I never expected something like this. The next morning, I made up my mind. If they didn't want me there, I wouldn't go. But I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was okay either. For years, I've been sending money home to help with the house payments. When my dad lost his job 5 years ago, I started covering the mortgage. It wasn't cheap, but I did it because I thought it was my responsibility. But if my dad thought Christmas was better without me, then they could figure out without me, too. I grabbed a coffee, opened my laptop, and canceled the automatic payments. I didn't feel angry or satisfied, just a strange emptiness in my chest. Then I closed the laptop and decided not to go to Colorado Springs. Instead, I rented a cabin outside Denver to spend the holidays alone. I thought the snow and quiet might help me clear my head. The first few days were weird. I wasn't used to having no orders, no routine. I walked the trails, read a book I grabbed at the airport, and tried not to think about my dad. But 2 days before Christmas, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 10 missed calls. 5 from my mom, 3 from Valeria, 1 from Axel, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize. There was a voicemail from a man who said his name was Robert Clean, my family's lawyer. "Mr. Pablo, this is Robert Clean, your parents' attorney. I need to speak with you regarding an urgent matter with the property in Colorado Springs. Please call me back." I listened to the message twice. The word property made my stomach drop. There was only one property. The house, the one I'd been paying for. I called the lawyer. "Thanks for getting back to me," he said smoothly. "There's a problem with your parents' mortgage. Payments have stopped. If it isn't resolved in 30 days, the bank will begin foreclosure proceedings." Foreclosure. I stayed silent for a moment. I knew exactly why the payments had stopped. Because I canceled them. I just didn't expect the bank to react so quickly. I kept my voice calm. "I understand," I said, "but I don't see how this is my problem. I paid that mortgage for years. No one ever asked me to. If they're in trouble now, they can figure it out. There was a pause. Clean spoke carefully. I know this is difficult, but your parents can't afford the payments. If nothing's done, they'll lose the house. I'm sorry. I replied flatly, and I meant it. My father said he didn't want me home. If Christmas is better without me, I guess the mortgage is too. I hung up. My heart was pounding. For the first time in days, I felt real anger, not at the lawyer, but at my father, at my whole family. I gave everything for them for years. And now, one message and it all falls apart. That night, as snow fell outside the cabin, I got a text from Valeria. Pablo, please call Mom. She's heartbroken. I don't know what's going on with Dad, but we need you. I didn't answer. I turned off my phone and poured myself a whiskey. I knew this wasn't the end. Cutting off the payments would come with consequences. But for the first time, I felt in control. And though I wouldn't admit it then, part of me wanted to see what would happen next. The next day was quiet. Too quiet. I woke up early, made coffee, and walked through the snow. The cabin was small but warm, with a fireplace that kept the cold away. I tried not to think about my family. But of course I did. Valeria's words kept echoing in my head. We need you. Part of me wanted to believe it. But the other part, the one still hurting from my father's message, couldn't. I got back to the cabin around noon and turned my phone back on. More missed calls. 3 from my mom, 2 from Valeria, 1 from Clean, and 1 from my father. His message was short, as always. But this time, the tone was different. Pablo, we need to talk. Call. I didn't call. Instead, I decided to contact a lawyer. I needed to understand what was going on with the mortgage and why the bank was moving so fast. I dialed Clean's number again. He picked up on the second ring. Mr. Pablo, thank you for calling, he said, in that polished, professional voice that was really starting to get on my nerves. We got a serious problem. I don't know if you realize this, but your name is on a mortgage as a co-signer. If payments don't resume, the bank can come after your wages and assets. I froze. Co-signer? I never signed anything like that. I'd been paying the mortgage to help. Not because I had to. There was a long, awkward silence. That's a problem, Clean said. According to the bank's paperwork, your signature is on the loan documents. If you didn't sign it, someone else did in your name. We need to look into this immediately. The bank won't wait. They'll move forward with legal action. I nearly dropped the phone. Someone had forged my signature, and it didn't take a genius to figure out who. My parents were the only people who had access to my personal info. When I started sending money, I thought I was helping. I thought it was my choice. Now I felt betrayed. They tied me to that debt behind my back. I want to see the documents, I said, doing my best to stay calm. And I'm not paying a dime until this is sorted out. I understand, Clean replied. I'll send you copies of the mortgage files. But just know, the bank won't pause foreclosure while we investigate. And your parents, they're desperate. They've asked me to urge you to keep making the payments. Let them handle it, I said, and hung up. I sat on the couch, my mind spinning. I couldn't believe my parents would forge my name. But the more I thought about it, the more it added up. My dad had always been controlling. And my mom, kind, but never strong enough to stand up to him. I vaguely remembered, years ago, they asked me to sign something just in case. I said I'd do it later, but I never did. Or at least, I thought I didn't. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mom. I didn't want to answer, but something made me swipe the screen. Her voice was trembling, almost broken. Pablo, please don't do this, she said. I don't know what your father said in that message, but it was a mistake. We want you home. The house is all we have. If you stop paying, we'll lose it. Please, son, do it for me. I felt a tight knot in my chest. Part of me wanted to give in, say it was all okay, go back to how things were. But the part of me that had just learned someone forged my name, that part couldn't let it go. Mom, I said, did you know my signature is on that mortgage? I never signed anything. Someone did it for me. Silence, then a quiet sob. I don't know what you're talking about, Pablo. I just know we need your help. You've always taken care of us. Don't abandon us now. I hung up without saying another word. Her voice felt like a hook, trying to drag me back into the old routine, me sacrificing them depending on me. But this time, something was different. It wasn't just my father's message. It was betrayal, a lie that tied me to a debt I never agreed to. That night, I made two decisions. First, I restarted the mortgage payments, but only for now. I couldn't let the bank come after my savings or wages while I figured this out. Second, I was going to collect evidence of the forgery. If my parents really faked my signature, I wasn't letting it slide. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about principle. They'd used me, and I couldn't forgive that. The next day, Christmas Eve, I called Mike, a friend from the Army who now worked as a private investigator. I told him everything. The message, the mortgage, the signature. Mike paused. This sounds messy, Pablo. Give me a couple of days. I'll get the records. If it's a forgery, we'll know. I also called the bank and restarted the automatic payments. It felt like swallowing glass, but I had no choice. That afternoon, Clean emailed me copies of the mortgage documents. I opened the file slowly, and there it was, my signature, or something close enough to pass as mine. It wasn't exactly how I signed now, but it was close. Too close. Whoever did it knew how I signed things years ago. Christmas Day was the strangest one of my life. Instead of being at home with my family, I was alone in a cabin, going through documents and talking to Mike on the phone. My family kept calling. Valeria texted again and again, begging me to come home. Axel, who never says much, left a voicemail saying he was disappointed in me and in our dad. And my father, he left a message too. You're selfish, Pablo. You always have been. Do the right thing for once. That one stung, not because of the insult, but because of the manipulation. They didn't care how I felt. They just wanted the payments to keep coming. Each call, every message, it only made me more determined. I was going to find the truth. And if it meant suing my own family, I would. 2 days later, Mike called. I've got something, he said. I tracked down records from the notary where the mortgage was signed. A witness says they saw your father signing your name. There's also a security video. It's grainy, but it's something. We'll need a signature expert to confirm it's not yours. Get the expert, I said. Whatever it costs. Mike hesitated. This could get ugly, Pablo. If you sue your parents, there's no going back. Your family, it'll be shattered. It already is, I replied. The following days were a roller coaster. I was in constant contact with Mike, while the handwriting expert examined the signature. Meanwhile, I hired a lawyer, Sarah Lopez. She had a reputation for tearing fraud cases apart. Sarah reviewed the documents. Her verdict was clear. The signature wasn't mine. We had enough to move forward with legal action, but she warned me the process would be long, and until the lawsuit played out, the bank could still treat me as a co-signer. In the meantime, my family didn't back off. My mom kept calling, crying, saying the stress was making her sick and that it was my fault. Valeria sent a message saying she'd never forgive me if they lost the house. And my dad, he was the worst. He called late one night and, without even saying hello, just said, if you keep this up, you'll regret it. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I didn't answer, but his words stuck with me. For the first time, I wasn't scared of losing the house. I was scared of him. He'd always been tough, but I never imagined he'd go this far. Still, that fear just gave me more resolve. If they really forged my signature, if they tied me to a loan without my consent, they had to face the consequences. By the end of the week, I had a plan. I'd keep paying the mortgage, for now, just to protect myself from the bank. But at the same time, I was collecting every shred of evidence I could. Sarah, my lawyer, was already drafting the lawsuit. Mike was digging up more documents. I knew this was going to court, and though I didn't want to admit it, part of me was ready for the fight. Christmas had passed, but the real storm was just beginning. My family thought they could guilt me into backing down. But they didn't realize I wasn't the same Pablo who left for the Army 10 years ago. I wasn't going to roll over this time. I was ready to stand up for myself, even if it meant going against all of them. The next few months were a whirlwind. I kept paying the mortgage to keep the bank off my back, but each payment felt like a punch in the gut. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mike worked nonstop to build the case. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about betrayal. They'd used me, and I couldn't just let that go. Sarah was incredible, tough as nails, and she didn't flinch under pressure. We combed through every document, every email, every piece of communication. Mike's investigator found more dirt. The handwriting expert confirmed the signature on the mortgage wasn't mine. And while the notary security video was grainy, it showed my dad signing something while chatting with the notary. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it lined up with the notary's assistant, who remembered my father acting weird that day. Together, it made for a solid case. My family didn't just sit back. My mom kept calling, still crying, still blaming me for everything. Valeria sent angry texts, calling me a traitor. Even Axel, who usually stayed out of things, messaged me saying he was ashamed of both me and Dad. And then there was my father again. One night, he called with that cold, dead voice. "If you go through with this lawsuit, I'll destroy you. You don't know who you're dealing with." It shook me, but it didn't stop me. If anything, it pushed me harder. Sarah warned me the trial wouldn't just be legally tough. It'd be emotionally brutal. You'll be facing your own parents in court, accusing them of fraud. That's not easy, Pablo. But I'd already made peace with that. There was no going back now. The trial was set for a Friday morning in a small courtroom in Colorado Springs. It had been 4 months since Christmas. I was still living at the cabin near Denver, but I made the trip down for the hearing. When I walked into that courthouse, I felt my stomach twist. The courtroom was tiny, with dull gray walls and that stale, industrial cleaner smell. Sarah stood beside me, flipping through her notes. Mike sat in the front row, nodding at me with quiet support. Across the aisle sat my parents. My mom looked like a ghost, red eyes, trembling hands. But my dad, he stared at me with a rage I'd never seen before. Valeria and Axel weren't there, but Sarah said they'd submitted statements backing my parents. That hurt more than I expected. I really thought Valeria would understand, but I was wrong. The judge walked in, an older man with thick glasses, and opened proceedings. Sarah started strong, calm, precise. She laid out the story, how I'd been paying a mortgage for years without knowing I'd been listed as a co-signer. Then she introduced the signature expert, the notary video, and the employee's testimony. Every bit of evidence landed like a hammer, breaking through my parents' lie. Their lawyer, a nervous guy named Greg Turner, tried to make a case. He claimed I had verbally agreed to be a co-signer and that my consistent payments were proof. Then he tried to frame my parents as victims, saying they were desperate, out of work, and made a bad call out of necessity. But Sarah tore that defense apart. She made it clear, desperation doesn't excuse fraud. Forgery is a crime, period. When it was time for testimonies, it felt like walking barefoot on glass. I took the stand, my father's stare cutting through me like a blade. I told my story, how I paid the mortgage to help out, how I never signed anything, and how I found out about the forgery after my dad's message. Their lawyer pushed back, asking why I kept paying if I didn't agree. I stayed calm, because I didn't want the bank to take everything while I figure out what they'd done. Then my dad took the stand, head held high, acting like he was still in control. He claimed he never forged anything, that I gave him permission to use my signature. But when Sarah cross-examined him, his story started to fall apart. He couldn't explain why there was no written consent. He couldn't explain the video showing him signing in my name. His voice cracked, and for a second, I saw something I'd never seen in him before: fear. My mom didn't testify. Sarah advised against it. She looked like she was about to break down the whole time, but her silence said enough. She knew what they'd done, and she couldn't defend it. The trial lasted 2 days. It felt like forever. When the judge finally delivered his verdict, I could breathe again. He ruled the signature was forged. I was not legally responsible for the mortgage. He ordered my name removed from the documents and said the bank couldn't pursue me anymore. Most importantly, he found my parents guilty of fraud. No jail time, but they were fined and flagged for further investigation by the bank. When the judge finished, my father stood and walked out. Didn't even glance my way. My mom stayed in her seat, quietly crying. I wanted to walk over, say something, but Sarah gently stopped me. "Give it time," she said. "This isn't over, but you won today." That night, I went back to the cabin and poured myself a whiskey, just like I did the night this all started. Only this time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel afraid. I felt relieved, but also hollow. I had won the trial, but lost my family. No one called me after the verdict. Not Valeria. Not Axel. Not even my mom. And my dad, I knew we were done for good. A week later, I got a letter from the bank. They'd started foreclosure on my parents' house. Since I was no longer tied to the loan, I wasn't responsible. But Mike told me they couldn't keep up with the payments. The house I grew up in, it would be gone. Part of me felt guilty. But another part remembered my dad's words. "Christmas is better without you." They made their choice. I decided it was time to move on. I talked to Sarah, and we agreed to file a civil lawsuit against my parents. For all the years I paid the mortgage under false pretenses. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. If I won, the money could help me start fresh, maybe even buy a place of my own. I also spoke with my CO in the Army and requested a transfer, somewhere far from Colorado. I didn't want to keep living in the past. Right before I left, I got one last message from Valeria. It was short, but it gave me a little hope. "I'm sorry, Pablo. I shouldn't have turned against you. I hope someday you can make peace with Mom. I love you." I didn't reply, but I saved the message. Maybe someday I'll talk to her again. Maybe even my mom. But my dad? There's nothing left to salvage. As I packed the last of my things in the cabin, I looked out the window. Snow was still falling, just like it was that night before Christmas. I'd lost a lot, but for the first time in years, I felt free. The forgery, the trial, the betrayal, it had shattered something inside me. But in that breaking, I found strength I didn't know I had. I had no idea what the road ahead looked like, but I knew I was ready to walk it. So, with a suitcase in one hand and an uncertain future waiting outside, I stepped out of the cabin and closed the door behind me.